This year's conference was co-hosted by Virginia's Department of Agriculture, the State Farm Bureau, the Virginia Port Authority, and Virginia Tech. Well, the Farm Bill currently working its way through the House allocates an additional $1 billion for rural broadband deployment. RFD-TV's Sarah Mock checks in on the ongoing rural broadband work at the USDA and beyond.
FCC Commissioner Ajit Pai wants to close the digital divide in rural America.
According to the FCC's latest numbers, more than 24 million Americans still lack access to fixed terrestrial broadband at the 25 megabit per second standard. That is 8% of the U.S. population. And these stats also show that this is largely a rural problem. Only 2% of urban Americans can't get high-speed home broadband, but it's 30%, almost 1 out of 3 for rural Americans.
Part of his strategy involves new funding programs to build critical infrastructure in rural communities, including reverse auctions.
By one estimate, reverse auctions can lower the cost of connecting an area by some 20%. And that means that we can stretch these scarce dollars even further and connect even more Americans. And we've done a lot to make sure the auction is accessible to everyone, regardless of technology or sector of the industry.
Auction bidding is set to begin July 24th, and Pai says this process will make a big dent in the digital divide. But the FCC is also focused on wireless infrastructure and will invest $4.53 billion over the next decade in 4G LTE service in underserved rural areas.
We are structuring the mobility fund to serve land area rather than just road miles. That is, coverage not only for the concrete of the highways, but for the soil of America's croplands and ranch lands. And we made this decision in large part because we know that farmers and ranchers need wireless connectivity in order to remain productive and competitive.
USDA is also active in broadband deployment, and the Ag Secretary says he's looking forward to supporting the FCC and private industry efforts through allocations in the 2018 Farm Bill, as well as with $600 million the USDA received in the recent omnibus spending package.
Whether or not the money is adequate, it's a good start. Once again, I don't think it's expected of the federal government or any government to do everything. We want a business model that's sustainable and viable for the future with a subscriber base, but oftentimes it takes a government entity to take that risk to get it over the top on the beginning where these companies can take over.
Pai emphasized his focus on a common complaint for lawmakers, that FCC universal service funds go to subsidize additional competitors in areas where private investment already exists, rather than on truly unserved or underserved communities. Pai says focusing on areas that truly have no access is his top priority. For RFD-TV, I'm Sarah Mock in Washington.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, additional funding for rural broadband was expected in the upcoming infrastructure plan proposed by the White House earlier this year, but have stalled in Congress, most likely due to midterm elections.